Hello and welcome to the Rabid Atheist. I'm Rabyd, former pastor turned atheist, now compassionate anti-theist. Welcome to my channel. Feel free to like or dislike the videos you see fit, so feel free to hit those buttons. Feel free to comment below, and I would appreciate it if you would subscribe to the channel and hit your notification bell for more content as it is released. You're also free to share my videos as much as you like, because the purpose of this channel is educational in regards to atheist and deconversion issues and any issues related to those issues. A hearty shout out to the Rabyd Nation. Join the nation by hitting that subscribe button. And if you want to support the channel in a more tangible way, hit the join button, and your membership options that lead to citizenship in the Rabyd Nation will be presented to you. Today I want to, normally on Thursdays I do, like a running discussion, asking various questions about God, in general, whether there's a God, what are the arguments for and against God, things like that. But because it's Holy Week, I decided to get really Christian specific and ask the simple question, does the resurrection actually prove that Jesus was the Son of God? Now, in Christian theology, the resurrection is a big deal, okay? It proves everything. It proves, that he was born of a virgin. It proves his miracles. It proves the anointing of God on Jesus when he teaches. It proves the sacrifice of Jesus was pleasing to God. It proves Jesus has this power over death that he can give to everybody else. And ultimately, it proves he has the Son of God. Now, I'm going to fully acknowledge that there are various groups of people that use Jesus as a Messiah figure that don't acknowledge he is the Son of God, but rather he's the Son of God in the sense that God picked him and endowed him with power over time, but that doesn't mean he's co-equal to God. So there's a lot of, but even there, they use the resurrection as proof of the fact that he was, picked and anointed by God to do this sacrificial work. And that Jesus, is basically a Superman who, God anointed to do the work of redemption. He's not, there's no Trinity in such views. I acknowledge that. But even the resurrection in those cases is used that in theology where God is this superhuman figure that still performs the act of redemption. And so therefore, he proves it. The resurrection proves all that stuff. Now, I'm just asking the simple question today, does the resurrection prove the Son of God? But I think all those other things that are claimed about Jesus that somehow Jesus fulfills are also under the gun here a little bit, because the resurrection kind of is this, capstone to the work of Christ, and then that verifies it, validates everything else that he did, and everything else said about him. Now, there's a lot of problems. Most notably, I think, is how many people are resurrected from the dead, and why are we, at this point, I have to ask the question, why are we giving special credence to the resurrection of Jesus when in the Bible itself, there are many resurrections from the dead, okay? I'll get to the other parts about how many mythologies have resurrections and does that prove they're true as well, but it doesn't, really bode well for Christianity when you consider how many people are resurrected from the dead. In the Old Testament, you have a widow's son being resurrected, a Shunammite son being resurrected. You have a man thrown into Elijah's grave who is resurrected. So the Old Testament has its own resurrection stories. And then you get to the New Testament where Jesus raises Jairus' daughters, he raises the young man at Nain, and then he raises Lazarus from the dead. Why isn't the resurrection significant for them? What does that prove about them? All of a sudden, the discussion of what that proves about them ends. But probably the most damning one is the resurrection of a number of unknown saints during the crucifixion. Matthew 27:52 through 53 tells that story of how many people, there were saints that came out of the graves and went into the city and appeared to many. Now, that's purely for the Bible tells you so again, because there's no historical record of that. Nobody in Jerusalem at the time writes about it and says, oh, wow, this is significant. I need to write this down. None of that happens. But there's a rash of resurrections. Why doesn't their resurrections prove something about them? It's only this special pleading about Christ, that somehow Jesus has this narrative built around him, and his resurrection somehow proves more than the other resurrections. I mean, we're all talking about people coming back from the dead, Well, Jesus rose himself. Well, yeah, but that creates another contradiction. God raising himself from the dead. So he's alive but dead at the same time. The theological contradictions that come up in that story, because you have to kind of say, no, Jesus was genuinely dead, and, God the Father raises him from the dead, but God the Son is dead. The Trinity really adds a further complication. It tries to answer a problem by creating other problems. But, then later on, there's more resurrections. Tabitha, Dorcas, Euclidicus, I never can say that word, and then the promise of other resurrections. So if there's going to be more resurrections, and there are more resurrections in the Bible, why is Jesus' resurrection significant when they're all people that were dead and came back to life? Being dead and coming back to life seems to be a very common theme inside of the Bible. And that doesn't even stop there. I mean, how many mythologies have a mythological character that comes back from the dead? Does that prove their stories? Okay. Does it prove the same thing for them, that this actually proves their deity? I've had comments over the years where, like, you have to disprove everybody else's religious claims. You can't just not accept them. I get that all the time. I don't like the idea that you just disbelieve. Okay, because people who are theists who believe in something, who have faith in something, don't understand people that don't have faith in anything. Okay, they just don't. They don't get it. It doesn't compute in their brain for some reason. It computed in my brain after a while, but it was like, I remember what it was like back then because I couldn't fathom somebody not believing in something. But now it's like, yeah, I can understand. I mean, I didn't believe in Zeus or Odin before. I didn't believe in Apollo or Hercules or any of those guys. Um, so why would Jesus and Yahweh be any different? And so the idea, of belief coming from this resurrection, when so many other mythologies have resurrection, when the story itself has a ton of unknown saints that rise from the dead at the time of Jesus' crucifixion and appeared in the city, wouldn't Jesus be just another one of them? Okay, it really undercuts this idea, because how does that, even in and of itself, prove that Jesus is the Son of God? If we already have a whole bunch of resurrections where God is raising people by his power, Jesus just becomes another one of them. And it seems like a lot of special pleading, special consideration is given to Jesus because we want to create this narrative of him being the Son of God. So it really sounds like it, and the resurrection and the way it's treated, particularly the resurrection of Jesus, is treated, it's like we have this narrative that we want Jesus to be the Son of God in the story. And so we add the resurrection as kind of another proof, except miracles happen to everybody, and a lot of different people perform miracles. A lot of people in the Bible have significant teachings. Miracles are everywhere. Um, there is no other biblical character that's claimed to be a virgin birth story, but there's a rash of them in every other mythology. Um, you know, does it prove anybody else's sacrifice is pleasing to God because they rise up from the dead? Cyrus raises from the dead on a regular basis. This whole cycle of life and death. Does that prove he is who he is? It seems to me that the whole proof that the resurrection proves everything about Jesus doesn't prove anything. It proves that there's a claim that Jesus rose from the dead, and that's all it really proves. But the idea of rising from the dead doesn't really help anything. The other thing it does is I think it actually undermines the sacrifice of God, because it turns what could be a great redemption story where, Jesus, who proves himself to be the Son of God by all these other proves he's immortal. I mean, the better story would be, Jesus hangs around for a couple centuries and thus doesn't change. He becomes the incarnation of the Highlander kind of thing, where he just lives forever, gets killed many times but keeps coming back, even has his head sliced off and comes back from that, and proves over and over that he's immortal. And we get all these historians writing down all this stuff and all the things that they witnessed about how he went through things. And, maybe he invents the video camera and sets it up so you can actually see it today, and impresses the hell out of everybody. And then he decides to give up his immortality so humanity can have an opportunity to live forever instead of staying dead. And then Jesus dies and then stays dead because that's the sacrifice. That would be a legitimate God sacrificing something, okay? But he didn't do that. He has a bad weekend and then rises from the dead. He loses nothing. When you really look at the quote-unquote sacrifice of God, there isn't much of a sacrifice. In fact, the Bible goes on to kind of say that God gained something from this. So he didn't really lose anything, and he gained some added stuff. It seems, when Christians want to make like the crucifixion this big deal and this big sacrifice, it's like how the resurrection actually undercuts that idea. And so it would be better if Jesus stayed in the tomb, that he had proved that he was immortal, that he was the Son of God ahead of time, then dies, gives up his immortality, so the rest of humanity has an opportunity for immortality, and you have a choice about it. That would be a better story. But the way the story is told, it really undercuts the whole business of whether even Jesus was the Son of God, whether he had any power over death, whether this is really a sacrifice, on the cross either. If Jesus, who prophesies in the text several times that he's going to be 3 days in the tomb and then rise from the dead, all that really is okay, you're God, you can predict the future, great. Especially when you know you're going to commit the action yourself. But what kind of sacrifice is it? So he experiences a lot of pain. He knows what it's like to have pain as a human. He knows what it's like to die. So what? So he can have more human empathy, and try to have human empathy. But how is it going to represent human empathy when a human faces death? They face, the end and eternity at the end. Whereas God doesn't face that. Jesus basically gets up 3 days later and says, well, didn't like that, and moves along. Okay? But he knows that he has the means to get over it. I don't think the resurrection proves a damn thing. It really actually undercuts redemption. It would have made more sense if Jesus proved that he was immortal and had all these truly genuine convincing proofs that he was immortal, that he was the Son of God, that he had this hotline to God, whatever, lived for a few centuries, proved that, got it videotaped, all these different things, and it could be proven by skeptics that no, this is the real deal. He's the real deal, okay? And then announces to the world, he says, I'm going to give up my own immortality. I love you all. Even though I'm God, I'm going to give up, one member of the Trinity is going to sacrifice himself so the rest of humanity can have an opportunity of eternal life. Now that's a love story. That's something that you can take to the bank. Like you can go, oh, wow, God actually is giving up his own immortality so that we can have a shot at it. That's a real love story. That's a genuine concern for humanity story. But that's not the story that's told in the Bible. That's not the story that's told in the New Testament. We have a God having a bad 3-day weekend and getting up. And then he gains something from it, even. More glory and power to himself. And that's the real problem. That is the real issue, okay, when I look at this story now, because it doesn't make a lot of sense. Not to mention that the historicity of the resurrection is a little bit questionable, just a bit. Okay, we have a bunch of people telling stories that it happened, but they can't seem to get their story straight. And some people don't even bother, like Mark. Mark doesn't even bother to tell a resurrection narrative. And the other 3 can't get their story straight. So we need to remember, I think, that I don't think the resurrection proves he's the Son of God. I don't think it proves anything. There's so many resurrections in the Bible. I mean, why are we picking this one particular one out and making it special when there's a whole rash of other ones? Why isn't Lazarus the Son of God? Because Jesus raises him from the dead. God raising somebody from the dead. If God raising something that makes them significant, then there's a whole hell of a lot of people in the Bible that deserve some sort of significance, including all the saints that came back to life at the moment of his death. Okay? Seems like that would be an event that some historian would chronicle, but nope. There's all this stuff that just doesn't make sense anymore, does it? When you deconvert it and you see this stuff, you can't unsee it unless you're blinded by indoctrination and faith. Okay, and that's where you dwell. And so that's kind of, that's my question for the day. Does this really prove that Jesus is the Son of God? And how does it do that? And I'd be interested, it's a discussion starter as always on Thursday. And because we're dealing with Christians in their Holy Week, here we go. This kind of, let's talk about Christian theology for a little bit and how it doesn't make sense. And you theists are welcome to try to make it make sense. Go ahead, but I'm pretty now convinced that this just doesn't make any sense. It's mythology just like the rest of it, and that's kind of where I'm at. Well, thanks for stopping by. I appreciate every like, share, and subscribe. Comment away on this issue. I'll be glad to watch and listen and see what happens with this little discussion. But thank you to all of you that support this channel. I also want to give a special shout out to this moment to my members, to my citizens and Rabyd citizens on your screen. These are the people that make videos, some of my videos possible, the ones that don't get the likes, shares, and subscribes like some of the other ones. These people support those videos, make those videos worth producing. Thank you very much. You guys are awesome. I appreciate you. And as always, live your best life. You only get one go around. There is no resurrection from the dead. So you want to take all your time, your money, your opportunities and spend them on yourself, on the people you love and care for, and to make this a better world. And don't waste them on the trappings of religion and faith, because that's a dead end. I speak from experience. And as always, thanks for stopping by, and I'll catch you next time.